ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितमेन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितमेन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो नमो अनिरुद्धाय ऋषिकेशेन्द्रियात्मने, नमः परमहंसाय पूर्णाय निवृत्तात्मने, स्वर्गापवर्गद्वाराय नित्यं शुचि सदे नमः। नमः हिरण्यवीर्याय चातुर्होत्राय कान्तवे। Thank you for joining me. We're just going to give one more minute and we'll get started. Meanwhile, as we wait for other viewers to come to begin today's session, what we were planning to do was to be able to recap the previous week's session. As we discussed before, we are going to have 2 sessions a week. So it's going to be Monday nights at 9 o'clock and then again Thursday nights at 9 o'clock. The previous week being Sri Gaur Purnima, we decided that it could possibly interfere with schedules, and also the fact that we also had to engage in sadhana and our own activities because of the nature of the day. So as a consequence, it was decided that we would refrain from giving a class, but I apologize to some of you who joined and who were anticipating a class on Thursday. I believe it was the bad weather and the program in the temple was cancelled and you were available. So I apologize. Next time, we would make sure that there's adequate communication prior to beginning the session, or even before we make any changes to the schedule. So as we discussed, we wanted to give you a summary of the previous week's session so that there would be some amount of continuation. And the thrust of the argument in the previous week started with understanding that the results of sadhana are dependent on 2 factors. One is our effort, and the other is the mercy, kripa, or the supplementing or complementing our effort by the Lord. And we've traversed through 4 different yugas. We noticed that in Satya Yuga, it was completely dependent on sadhana. So one could be a sadhana siddha. When we use the word siddha, siddha specifically means one who has attained siddhi. And siddhi is perfection. A perfection in the particular sadhana or the results or the fruit or the phal of the specific activity that the person has taken up. So a sadhana siddha is one who is able to commit himself or herself to rigorous sadhana, whose environment is conducive, whose consciousness allows them to draw upon immense resources that they've accumulated through several factors, and whole society, including the government and including everything else, the economic arrangement, the whole process of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending is all arranged in a manner with sadhana being the focus. And that is how society was in Satya Yuga or Treta Yuga, when Lord Ramachandra was reigning as the king. The whole process of governance, so the whole focus of arranging society, was centered around being able to exist and follow through on the process of eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and use the process of eating, mating, sleeping, defending to accumulate enough sukriti for them to be able to move forward. So there was some amount of expectation that one is born avarna or without a varna, and then he passes on and becomes a part of varnashram. So he becomes a shudra, and then he progresses on to take on the life of a vaishya who is a businessman, and then he takes on kshatriya and then becomes brahmana, and then finally he is able to traverse. So one is able to make progress in the social order, and the social order was designed based on consciousness. And consciousness would prompt them to act in a certain manner. One would be prompted by internal consciousness to adopt a certain duty. Right? The Brahmana would have a propensity, because of his consciousness, to take up Brahmanical life. They would have a propensity. And they would not deviate because society supported them. They knew exactly that society would support them if they did their duties properly. So did the Kshatriyas. The ayana, or the direction of life, or the goal of life, was defined by Varna. So the four Varnas had very specific goals. The Brahmana had moksha as the objective. So he engaged in intense objective of attaining moksha. So he used to focus so much on reading Shastra. They used to focus so much on following rules and regulations. The whole life of a Brahmana was to follow the samskaras. So the way of life was, I'm very busy. I have a samskara in the morning, samskara in the evening, samskara in the afternoon. I have so many different things, rules and regulations. Oh, if you got to go and draw water in the middle of the night, you got to chant some mantras. If you're going to go near a specific place, you got to chant some mantras. The whole idea of a Brahmanical life was ritual based, and that was life. They were not meant to focus on anything else. And this allowed them to be of service to society because they had propensity by virtue of consciousness and by virtue of accumulated piety over several births. Both of these factors contributed to their ability to be able to serve as Brahmana. And then the Kshatriyas have the ayana of dharma. Enforcing and protecting dharma is the goal of being born in a Kshatriya household. So a Kshatriya needs to know what is dharma. So a Kshatriya, and if you notice, Krishna spoke to Arjun, who was a Kshatriya. Lord Ramachandra, when he appeared, he was Kshatriya. They were not born in a situation where they were going to hide in a cave. They were born in a situation where they could set up society in a conducive manner, and so the society itself could progress in a manner that was designed to facilitate gradual progress from one level of consciousness to another, go from absolute ignorance, tamas, with the goal of only having fulfilling desires, that is Shudra. If we have the goal of only fulfilling the desires of the body, that is Shudra, Kama. Kama is the focus of the Shudra, right? Artha, which is the accumulation of wealth. If the sum and bonus and so on and so forth, and the whole goal of life is to accumulate wealth, then understand that there's mixed consciousness. There is both Rajas and there is Tamas. This is businessmen. One category above the Shudra, an improvement. If the whole goal of life is to enforce Dharma, then there is pure Rajas. Kshatriyas had pure Rajas. That's why they had the ability to withstand pain. They had the ability to manage. There was great propensity to create and to establish and to expand their kingdom. All of these processes require Rajas. And there was also the reason why they had many queens. Okay, more than one lady was married to proper Kshatriyas. It was a fact of life those days. And then you have the Brahmana, who had the goal of moksha, and his whole ideal was to accept whatever society gives him, not so much begging, more so in terms of being able to offer subtle credits. So when the Brahmana was being fed, his subtle credits were passed on to the Kshatriyas, to the Shudras, and to the businessmen. So there was society which knew that you had to support a certain class of people in a certain way. It was facilitated by kings who understood the word dharma. And dharma is not a complex word. Dharma means one who understands and the purpose of the soul. Duties performed with full knowledge of the goal of life as defined by the dweller within the body. That is dharma. Dharma is not simply based on being asked to do something which is because of our birth or because of our social circumstances. There is the category of inferior dharma and superior dharma. So when Krishna was asking Arjuna that you have to give up all varieties of dharma, sarva dharman parityajya, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. He was literally saying, give up all varieties of upadharma, chaladharma, or secondary objectives and duties of life and surrender unto me, because knowing who you are and knowing who I am, the duty that is defined after this knowledge is true dharma. So the Kshatriya who knew this dharma was a superior Kshatriya. He was a Raja Rishi. He was not just a Rishi or a Raja, he was a combination of Raja Rishi, self-realized but acting according to the propensity and duty demanded by society. Because when there's great power in being a king, you have the ability to enforce and protect the spiritual life of vast majority of the population. Because the arrangements that would be made by a knowledgeable king can go a very, very long way in being able to assist society. Right? So going back to our statement about last week, society was designed for progress in sadhana. So one could afford to be a sadhana siddha. And the expectation was that you become a sadhana siddha, because everything is being arranged, everything is being given. So why not expect the whole world from you? Why not expect things which are unprecedented? Why not expect that you would do things which are extraordinary? Because there's immense facility that's being provided. It's a very, very fair expectation. Contrast that with Kali Yuga, where the rulers do not know the definition of dharma because they are not self-realized. Society's resources are not adjusted, they are not being managed in a manner to facilitate sadhana. Okay? You don't have the US president and the Indian prime minister knowing fully well as to what is required for the soul to move from one level of consciousness to another. And without that knowledge, having such rulers is a liability in one sense, because for a sadhaka, they contribute nothing. They really contribute nothing. The arrangements being made by today's society is arrangements made for Shudras. That's why even the Brahmanas have become Shudras, because the facilities that are available are predominantly Shudra, right? Or Vaishya at best. So you don't really draw resources even into an extraordinary spiritual movement from, the ashrams of sages. These days, even an extraordinary spiritual movement like ours draws resources from a population that is predominantly exposed to Shudra arrangements. So this gives us a clear idea that you cannot be expected to do 100% and the results of your sadhana would be able to take you back. No. We are intellectually pygmies. The pygmy race in Africa, in some parts of South America, they are very short. Intellectually, we are pygmies. We don't have the capacity to remember things that we do in the morning. We don't have the capacity to digest Shastra. We don't have the capacity to pursue sadhana. We don't. Because by the time we chant 16 rounds, go to work, and whatever happens during the day between 8 and 5, it possibly reverses whatever happened before that. And then you have to come back again and reconnect, right? We all experience that because we carry so much of what we do during the day into the night. And then we again have to work on it to become ready the next morning. So one understands that the environment is not going to provision you for sadhana. So one cannot expect you to be a sadhana siddha. The other category which we spoke of is the Nitya Siddha, which does not require any discussion because they are liberated in the first sense. They belong to the spiritual sky. Both their feet are in the spiritual sky. They simply operate here as if they are a part of this environment. Even that is considered to be dangerous, even for them. What to say of ordinary souls? So we are Kripa Siddhas. We arrived at the particular agreement and understanding that we are completely dependent on Kripa. What does that mean? I do not want anyone to take away any misconstrued understanding of what I'm saying. What does it mean when I say that we are 100% Kripa Siddhas? We are Kripa Siddhas because our effort on its own merit is incapable of achieving anything. Please understand this very carefully. If this whole movement of Lord Chaitanya was dependent on our intelligence, our chanting, our arrangements, we would have gone nowhere. We went places because Krishna helped. So in a similar fashion, we want to say that on our own merit, 16 rounds, 32 rounds, or even 64 rounds is not going to cut anything. We are going to be completely dependent on the arrangement and the mercy of the Lord. What does it mean? It means that, yes, we have to be very diligent in doing our sadhana. We have to be very diligent in following the regulative principles given by the acharyas. We have to be very diligent in following the rules and regulations. All of these are required. We have to be diligent. We have to put in the very best of our effort. There's no doubt about this. But the result which is going to be given is disproportionate to the effort that is going to be put by us. That is the thrust of the argument. The results will be disproportionate to the effort put out by us. It will be disproportionate. One can never argue with that. It will be disproportionate. This does not mean we stop putting effort. It does not mean that we don't continue improving. It is required. It is required that we constantly focus on making improvements. We constantly focus on increasing the intensity. We constantly focus on being able to do more than what we did yesterday. Okay? But we are Kripa Siddhas. We are also completely dependent on the arrangement made by the Lord. And this is a true meritocracy. It is a meritocracy in the sense that if you put in your part and you do your bit, whatever is being given to us by Srila Prabhupada, he has already made arrangements for us to be picked up. But the arrangements that he has made in no way, form is equal to the efforts that we put in. That arrangement and the result of what we are supposed to be given is disproportionate to what we do. This is where we need to be very humble in understanding that, number one, we are not qualified. We are not qualified by any reason or merit for us to be getting the mercy we receive. The 16 rounds that we chant is not enough. We are completely dependent on Srila Prabhupada. And the whole of last week's class was focused on the fact that we need to focus on being able to keep our side of the contract. And keeping our side of the contract means being simply focused on being able to chant 16 rounds, because that's a bare minimum. I can possibly share a little bit about Mantra Shastra. Mantra Shastra advocates that the number of words in a mantra, you got to chant that many malas for you to attain Siddhi. There are other factors involved, but a very fundamental understanding is the number of rounds of any mantra is equal to the number of words. Okay? So 16 rounds equals 16 words, right? We have 16 words in the Maha Mantra. So there's no confusion. So there's a demand that you chant 16 rounds, and that's bare minimum. Srila Prabhupada said, okay, that is bare minimum. We can't go below. So that is the predominant reason why we need to focus on doing our part. We have to make sure that Prabhupada does not feel disappointed. He has made such wonderful arrangements. He has gone out of the way. He has created all these facilities. We have to do our part. It's as simple as that. And it is simply by being able to keep the side of the contract. The entire 16 rounds, even if you were to chant 7 minutes per round, how much does it come to? It's around approximately, we normally do it around 5 minutes. It's around 80 minutes for most part, an hour and 20 minutes. In a day, you have 1,440 minutes. Would you not be able to take out 80 minutes? Is that difficult? Even if you're chanting 16 rounds, I know there are many of you who chant 1 round, 4 rounds, 6 rounds. Is it really a challenge to take out 80 minutes out of 1,440? 24 hours times 60 is 1,440. I hope my math is right. Right? Is it difficult for us to take out 80 minutes? So that's the question that we have to ask ourselves. Now, last week, while I ended the session, I started speaking about this extraordinary conversation. I started speaking about who was there when this whole conversation took place. Who was it between? It was between Srila Haridas Thakur and Mahaprabhu himself. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he moved to Sri Jagannath Puri Dham, Jagannath, the deity of Jagannath, is very special. We have Jagannath at home. We had Jagannath, and then Kalpavriksha Prabhu gave us a lot of mercy by allowing us to serve the bigger Jagannath. And Jagannath is the highest expression of Krishna. He is the highest expression of Krishna. That's the reason why Mahaprabhu spent time in Jagannath Puri. He is the highest expression. If there is a form of Krishna in this material world which shows Krishna in the highest expression, in the highest mood, it is Jagannath. That's why Mahaprabhu moved there, because the Mahaprabhu came in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So towards the later years, when Mahaprabhu had taken up sannyas and he had moved to Jagannath Puri, Haridas Thakur was given and made some, there were some facilities made for Haridas Thakur. There was a tree. I think some of you who have visited Jagannath Puri have seen the tree. It is, I think it's called a Siddha Bahula tree or Bakula tree. It's one of those. Okay. Anyways, it's supposed to be a very special tree with some potency. And then beneath that, Mahaprabhu set him up so that he could sit and engage in Nam Bhajan, in seva of Sri Nama Prabhu. And during that time, Mahaprabhu used to visit him quite often. And during one such visit, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began talking to Sri Haridas Thakur because he was the Namacharya. Now this becomes very interesting. How would you choose someone based on meritocracy? That's the movement. Our movement is very special because it was not based on birth. It was not based on any other qualification. It was based on pure meritocracy. It was meritocracy because Sri Haridas Thakur had already displayed his dedication and his focus on chanting the holy names. He had already given all kinds of demonstrations. There was a time when Sri Haridas Thakur was chanting and some very mischievous people wanted to disturb his chanting. They were very envious. And they sent a prostitute to distract him. If it had been anyone else performing any other sadhana, they would have surely succumbed, because it is said that the prostitute was as powerful and she was fully empowered by Maya herself. And the reason why she was empowered was because this was to prove the potency of Srila Haridas Thakur as the Namacharya. It was also to prove the potency of the holy names. As the prostitute approached and sat down, it was proven that Srila Haridas Thakur transformed her nature into a pure chanter of the holy names and initiated her into Harinam in 3 days, as opposed to her being able to influence him in any manner. Where did this potency come from? This potency did not just come from his sadhana. This potency came from the fact that his internal quality was Trinadapi Sunichena, right? Taroriva Sahishnuna, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Sorry, I forget the full verse. Trinadapi Sunichena. Right? It came from the verse defining humility. And what is humility? Humility is the acceptance of one's environment as being arranged by Krishna and having the courage to act upon it. He was an extraordinarily humble devotee, and as a consequence, he was able to engage in kirtan at all times. Kirtaniya Sadahari. Right? So his humility protected him because he was completely dependent. When someone is begging within their heart, calling upon the holy names to protect them, protection will come. On the other hand, if it was a yogi or someone who was following some other process, they will not be able to do so because they are dependent on their own strength. This again is proof of being Kripasiddhas. Being a Kripasiddha means we depend, and dependence requires humility. Humility is essential because that will allow us to seek help. Humility is essential because that will allow us to seek help. But Haridas Thakur also had another ornament. He was extraordinarily compassionate. His compassion extended to not being envious of the person who came to upset his sadhana Instead, he gave her a gift of Harinam and initiated her and accepted her. It requires great compassion to be able to accept someone who has been a source of harm. Srila Prabhupada displayed this several times over during his pastimes on the planet. He accepted many deviations, or he accepted many actions of disciples with compassion and gave them a chance again and again and again. He was not in the mode of ignorance where some rishi or some sage would just curse because someone is deviating. He used to constantly look to see how he could facilitate even those who had moved away. Just as Sri Mahaprabhu, his assistant, himself deviated, even though he had the association of such a powerful personality as Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Lord himself, the assistant deviated. He went after the gypsies. But Mahaprabhu went and dragged them back. But what to say of Srila Haridas Thakur? There he was completely dependent on the holy names. He was an ornament or a personification of humility. He personified Trinadapi Sunichena, right? He could tolerate. Tarori was Sahishnuna. He was very humble, and we're going to talk about that as well in terms of tolerance and being able to accept the arrangement made by the Lord. The grass, Trina, accepts the arrangement made by the footsteps. When we walk on grass, what happens? The grass bends, isn't it? It does not really resist our walking. It bends. It allows us to walk. So what is that? It is a matter of being able to accept the fact that someone is walking on me and this is the arrangement of the Lord. Let me accept it. Because once you accept that something is being arranged by the Lord, then you would be able to very clearly see the plan of the Lord. So Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarori Vasahishnuna. Amani. Amani is having absolutely no pride. Being prideless. Prideless in the material sense. There's great pride in being a devotee and a servant of Lord Chaitanya. This is the greatest pride one can ever have, is to be given the opportunity to chant the holy names. Greatest. There's really nothing else which one can aspire for after coming into this planet. There's really no other goal. So Haridas Thakur was able to accept the arrangement of the Lord. He said, okay, a prostitute has come. She has come to distract me. And he said, this is the arrangement of the Lord. Oh Nama Prabhu, I have dedicated my life to calling up and glorifying you. And you're non-different. You're non-different. Abhinnatvam nama naminoho. There is no difference between you and the holy names. Between you and the holy names, there's no difference. That's the beauty of a process, because the sadhana and the sadhya are the same. You don't have any external interference. It's very beautiful. It's integrated. So he said, I'm going to depend on you completely. I'm going to depend on you, and I'm seeking your protection, and I'm going to chant. So he called upon the holy names with great humility, but also had great compassion on the person who came to affect him, the prostitute. Because without compassion, there would have been no initiation. Without his compassion, the holy names would not have blessed the other lady. It's impossible. It was the compassion of Haridas Thakur where he was able to take his Shraddha and make an impact on the person sitting next to him. Otherwise, it's not possible. So there was both humility and compassion, and these are ornaments which are given by chanting the pure name. It's a testament. Compassion comes when you chant. Humility comes when you chant. You need humility to chant, and chanting brings forth humility. Right? And what is humility? We got to take this meaning home. Humility is our ability to accept. That is the exact meaning. Trina. Be Trina. Be Trina. Trina the Pisunichena. Trina is grass. Be a blade of grass. Humility is the ability to accept the arrangements made by the Lord and to act upon it with courage. He acted upon it with courage. He chanted. He called upon the holy names in complete dependence. And what was the end result? She was transformed. That was his glory. She was transformed. On one other occasion, Srila Haridas Thakur displayed his extraordinary faith. So when we spoke of humility, compassion, we're talking about the quality of faith. Different. He displayed extraordinary faith. Faith develops or is required when we have not experienced something. So faith is developed when we have not experienced something, but we believe that that's what it is. So there's some amount of anuman, inference, that's being made that that's what it is. We used to share the experience, or rather the example of someone who is getting into an elevator at work. We do that every day at work. We get into an elevator and it goes up instead of going down when we press the button. That's faith. We are used to being faithful, by the way. We are used to being faithful. Faith is not alien to us. We get into an elevator, it goes up instead of going down. That is faith. Okay? One day, if it ever goes and does the opposite, we will lose faith. So his faith and his determination was so strong in the holy names because he had experiences. When faith increases to the point of being able to experience the holy names, then that is not called faith, it's called experience. So his faith was such that he was experiencing prema in the holy names, through the holy names, through the process of chanting the holy names. And as a consequence, when the local Islamic rulers decided that this person is a Muslim, he belongs to our faith, and he has deviated, he must somehow be taught a lesson, because if you catch him and teach a lesson, then everybody else would follow track. So they caught Haridas Thakur and began coercing him and forcing him to stop chanting the holy names. Imagine trying to tell the Namacharya that you should stop chanting. But he was extraordinary. He withstood all the beatings. It is said that he was beaten up in 22 different marketplaces. He withstood all the beatings, but never stopped chanting. How many of us are being beaten on a daily basis? None of us. What I'm trying to say is that we don't have extraordinary pressure or circumstances which should prevent us from being able to pick up our beads and chant. Is someone forcing us not to chant? Is someone even troubling us? No, we have been given such good, wonderful facilities. We can freely chant. We have no compulsion, no reason for us to even think that we cannot chant, which is a great blessing. It's not ordinary. So Haridas Thakur wanted to prove that even under the worst circumstances, you don't give up your faith. So when they started beating him and taking him from one marketplace to the other, these were 22 different marketplaces, he continued chanting. And he lost consciousness. He was not in the physical realm. They continued beating him to pulp and dumped him in the river, hoping and thinking that he had already passed on. So he had proven himself. One, he had proven himself of compassion and humility and determination, and he had proven himself of one with great faith. Sri Mahaprabhu loved to hear Dhruva Charita and Prahalad Charita from the Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis. Imagine focusing on just those two kathas from the Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis. And he used to love it so much that he used to make people recite that on a daily basis, and he used to hear very attentively. Why? Because Dhruva Maharaj displayed extraordinary determination. Dhruva means to be firm. He displayed extraordinary determination. Prahalad Maharaj, on the other hand, displayed extraordinary faith under very, very high level of duress. So you require determination, you require faith. Both of these qualities were displayed by Sri Haridas Thakur. In fact, Sri Haridas Thakur is considered an incarnation or an appearance again of Sri Prahalad Maharaj. Someone who could have such deep faith in the holy names that nothing possibly can deter him from or distract him from being able to chant. Someone who had extraordinary compassion, where Prahalad Maharaj forgave his own father. Even though he was abused so badly, he asked for mercy from Narasimhadev. Right? So is the case with Haridas Thakur. Without the prayers of Srila Haridas Thakur, it would have been impossible for that woman who came to seduce him to have been receiving the holy names. I can assure you of that there were prayers. There were prayers, there was an intense level of compassion, and that was what allowed him to pass on the holy names to that lady. Contrast this with a yogi who is completely dependent on his own prowess, his own qualities, and so on and so forth. And he lives in a cave. And the moment they come out of the cave and start traversing and traveling around and meeting with others, they find it very difficult to control their senses because this is dependent on their own prowess. This is a contrast. So being a bhakta, especially one who's following the Yuga Dharma, is a very special position. And it is actually very simple. All you have to do is cry out aloud to the holy names and beg for mercy. Hold on to the lotus feet of the holy names by holding on to the lotus feet of the beads. Think of each bead as being the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu himself. And chant. Chant with real feeling. So Haridas Thakur had already displayed his qualities, even though being of a birth which was not considered wonderful. Why is it even important? If you do anything else in Vedic society, birth becomes very important. The samskara of birth becomes very important in Vedic society, other than following the Yuga Dharma offered by Mahaprabhu. Why? To give you an example, someone who was born in a certain lineage, in ancestry, several centuries back, can still influence us today. Do not take this lightly. Do not take this lightly. Someone in our ancestry, if he had a propensity or she had a propensity for illicit connections, that can have an effect today, several generations down the line. The propensities are a part of the karmic reactions that we inherit by being born in a certain kula, in a certain family. That's why family tradition becomes very important. So there's a lot that is offered by family tradition because the corollary or the converse applies, where someone in the family had done a lot of wonderful things in the past. So they have the ability to pass on those merits to further generations. It's like a storehouse where people can draw resources from. So if someone had deviated, they cause the same problem. So that's the reason why the yearly oblations, the tarpana, Amavasya tarpana, which is a ritual which is done by everyone practically, whoever is in the varnas. You have to follow the Amavasya tarpana to be able to offer oblations to the ancestors. And the idea is by offering oblations to the ancestors, you would cleanse our own consciousness from their influence. Negative influences are taken away because there will be propensity for certain activity based on the ancestry. That's why family is important for anything else. But Mahaprabhu wanted to prove that Yoga Dharma, there will be absolutely no rules in terms of family tradition. There will be absolutely nothing which we would be following other than wanting to surrender to the holy names. So he chose someone with an extraordinary background. He chose someone who would be remembered as being an extraordinary person centuries ahead. So today in 2015, we can still say it was extraordinary that a Muslim was chosen as the Namacharya. 5 centuries, 6 centuries later, we can make this statement. Why? Because he had already strategized this. Nothing in this world happens if it has not already existed in the spiritual sky. If you are strategizing in various corporations, it is because strategy exists. And strategy exists because it exists in the spiritual sky. The greatest strategicians are spiritualists. We had this meeting of Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya, Haridas Thakur in Advaita Bhavan. That's where Srila Prabhupada went to get blessings before he came to the States. What were they doing? They were strategizing how to spread the mission. Srila Prabhupada wanted to go there so that he could come here with all the potency and the blessings of the parampara. So there was a lot of strategy involved. And this strategy was a part of why Haridas Thakur was chosen. He just went in the complete contrast. He chose someone who would normally not be accepted and said, this is the Namacharya, because the Yuga Dharma is to chant the holy names, and here's Namacharya, who is a complete contrast in terms of rules and regulations for following, your regular walk of life, in Vedic India or any other part for that matter. Okay, he chose that. He wanted to make a statement. He said, no rules and regulations. I mean it. Here's your Namacharya. Look at his qualification of birth. He has karma, which is contrast. Karma is going to determine our birth. It's going to determine who we are. But if there are desires that can overpower karma, then we have the ability to overpower karma and move forward. Okay? So that is what he wanted to prove by choosing Srila Haridas Thakur. I want to stop because I have gone over. It is 9:44, and maybe we can spend the next 10 minutes or so just taking questions. If you have any questions, I believe that we have the ability to do a Q&A. So, oh, I'm sorry. So, any questions, please, so that I can answer those. So let me quickly summarize while you think of your questions. Today we spoke of the fact that there are no rules and regulations. We spoke of the fact that there was intense strategy involved in being able to pick Srila Haridas Thakur with his background. Srila Haridas Thakur determined, or rather he displayed the qualities of the verse Trinadapi Sunichena, which is given in Sri Shikshashtakam. He displayed the fact that he was humble. He displayed the fact that he was extraordinarily compassionate. He displayed the fact that he had deep faith and he was determined beyond the body. He displayed all these facts. We also spoke of the fact that all of these are qualities that are required. We spoke of the fact that Mahaprabhu was extraordinarily attracted to Dhruva Charita and Prahalad Charita because both these charitas in the Srimad Bhagavatam display these qualities. He used to constantly listen. And to stress on the fact that there are no qualifications to be able to chant the holy names, Mahaprabhu chose a very special personality, okay, who went through a lot but presented himself as fully qualified to be Sri Namacharya. And that is why Mahaprabhu named him Namacharya. He is the Namacharya. So how does this conversation begin? The conversation begins by Mahaprabhu telling him to speak about the point of liberation. How can someone be easily liberated in this yuga? Haridas Thakur knows very clearly that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is the goal of life. So as a consequence, the moment this question was raised, he clasped both the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and began washing the lotus feet of Sri Mahaprabhu with his tears. And his idea was that, no, you are asking me a question, but you are going to be answering the question as well. So I'm going to grab your lotus feet and I'm going to move away. You answer the questions through me. So that's how we are hearing the glories of the holy name from Srila Haridas Thakur. He heard the question, he heard the orders from Sri Mahaprabhu, he took the order upon his head, that was humble, and then he took the order upon his head and stepped aside so that Mahaprabhu could use him as an instrument. This is what we need to do. We need to be able to receive orders and step aside and allow the parampara to be able to come through. So, any questions? There was a very good question from Mother Vilas Manjari. what exactly does it mean to accept it as arrangement of Lord, like grass? Grass bends. Does it mean that we should remain humble and tolerate every situation without reacting, thinking that there's an arrangement of the Lord? The answer is that in our mind, we have to accept the circumstances that we are in as being arranged by the Lord. Now remember that our own circumstances are an arrangement of our karma. For most part, our circumstances in life are being an arrangement of our karma. We have to have that understanding. But we also have to have the understanding that yes, these are my karmic reactions, but Krishna has also wonderfully arranged for me to move forward, and it is going to happen through the circumstances that I see now. So we accept the circumstances as Krishna's arrangement, and by doing so, even though it's just our karma and we involve him, it will become his arrangement, right? For example, I'm just giving a simplistic example to drive home the fact. If you go to the market and buy a basket of apples or any other fruit, it is just matter, right? It is just matter. That is it. It is just matter. So you buy a basket of apples and you bring it to the house, which is just material, and then you offer it to Krishna. Krishna accepts the apples and it becomes spiritual. So what happened here? Here, you bought the apples and you involve Krishna. Similarly, involve Krishna in the circumstances of your life by saying that these circumstances are very specifically engineered for my advancement. There's something here for me to learn, and that's the reason why these circumstances have come upon me. If you have such a mindset, there will be an opportunity to constantly see Krishna on a day-to-day basis in every arrangement that's being made. It's a very, very powerful way to be able to constantly engage in Krishna consciousness, because one would be able to see every arrangement as being made by the Lord, even though it could be our karmic reactions. If you trick him and say that this is my arrangement, this is fine, this is my karma, but I see it as your arrangement, and the moment you say that and you accept it in your heart, he will become involved. And if he becomes involved, we will start learning how to spiritualize the so-called intense situations that we are in and be able to accept it as the Lord's arrangement. That is the arrangement of Trinada Pisunicena. Trina. See, not every one of us is going to be picked up and beaten up in marketplaces. Not every one of us. Our problems are minor. So accepting them as Krishna's arrangement and being able to give 100% to the holy names is not a big deal. So one has to also be able to step aside and look and see that in relative sense, what we have is not a bad arrangement. We have Sangha, we have the ability to chant, we have a fairly healthy body, we have everything. So why are we complaining? Why not just accept all of this and say, this is the arrangement of the Lord? The moment we do that, it will become the arrangement of the Lord, and you will be able to draw power from the arrangement rather than becoming drained. Remember that. It's very important for us to just make that acceptance in our heart. It will transform the situation. Our spiritual master, Srila Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, used to call this the school of love. We are here to learn to love. It's a school. There will be different grades of students, some good, some better, some best. But we are all here to learn. And the idea is to be able to pass out and be able to love Mahaprabhu in a proper way. To do that, we first have to accept that this is his arrangement. The moment we start accepting that this is his arrangement, everything else will fall in place. Accept it. That's the point which we were trying to make, saying accept. This does not mean we become doormats. We have to have good understanding that what we are doing and why we are doing it. Okay? But first, in our heart, we accept it. It does not mean we don't speak out. It does not mean that we don't consider something as good or bad or friendly. The fact is that we accept it. Acceptance and judgment are two different things. Let me go on to the next question from Raj Prabhu. I heard Haridas Thakur is an incarnation of Brahma. You said he's Prahlad Maharaj. How do we understand this? There can be multiple personalities who incarnate. Even when we say Lord Brahma, we really do not know which Brahma. Do we talk about the Chaturmukha Brahma, or is he an 8-headed Brahma, or is he the 16-headed Brahma, or the 32-headed Brahma? Which universe? We do not know. So we use the word Brahma, yes, okay, but we also understand that there can be multiple personalities who project themselves through the personality of one person. It can be. Yes, because it's not possible in the material sense. We call it schizophrenia, right? We call it Jekyll and Hyde. There's a good side and a bad side. This person is schizophrenic because, he speaks this and then he speaks that, and then, he's got a split personality. The psychiatrist would diagnose this. But spiritual life falls into the category of being diunital. In theology, a word which we use to classify this is called diunital. An apparent contradiction can coexist in harmony. That's what we see in spiritual life. So there can be two different personalities. Lord Brahma, there can be Lord Shipalad Maharaj. You see that in many, many cases, not just in Haridas Thakur, that there was the influence of many different personalities. Okay? Not a contradiction. I hope that answers your question. If you have more, you can write to me. Or you can use the comments section on the website, and that will also help. I can answer. I answered some questions which was put out, or a comment. I responded. Any other question? From Sandeep Prabhu, how can we eliminate the unwanted thought process and propensity to act on it? A good way to understand if something is wanted or unwanted is to be able to put it through the filter of whether it is assisting or not assisting in the process of devotion. Excuse me. That's one way. Now, there are other ways to tame the mind. Taming the mind would require that you establish certain habits. Wake up at the same time. Okay? Wake up at the same time. Sleep in the same bed. I'm serious. Wake up in the same time, sleep in the same bed as much as possible. Okay? Eat at the same time before you go to bed. And when you wake up, do the same things. Wake up, probably have to use the restroom, wash yourself up. Do that in the same sequence, day in and day out. Sit in the same spot. Use the same seating arrangement. Okay? All of these, if it is followed by taking up the chanting of the holy name, would help the mind settle down and understand that, okay, this person is going to do this activity and he does not like to be disturbed. Okay? That is exactly how you do it. You tame the mind and help it understand that you are going to be doing something special and you don't need help. The second way is to be able to see if a particular thought process is helpful or not helpful. During chanting, you don't need that. Srila Prabhupada gave us very clear instructions. He said, chant and hear yourself chant. So two senses, speak and sense of hearing. You should be able to hear what you speak. Okay? Try that. It has helped me a lot where I used to concentrate on the hearing process. I used to plug my ears. I tried all kinds of things, and I found that it really helped in being able to hear how we chant. It really helps. Block everything out. Select the same block of time, same place, same mat, same everything. It helps. Okay? Try that. Kirtida Mataji, we as aspiring sadhakas, how to understand to which varna do we belong? How varnashrama plays its role in the life of a KC devotee? We will have to first make a determination on our propensities and increase our propensities. If you have Brahmanical propensity, and in fact, our entire movement, or rather our institution, was designed by Srila Prabhupada to cultivate Brahmanas. So if we have a certain propensity, we have to recognize that we have such a propensity and act upon it. And how do you act upon it? You dovetail that propensity in the service of Mahaprabhu. So if you have a propensity for doing a certain kind of business, do it very nicely and dovetail the process to Mahaprabhu. I'm just going to read something, and I remembered. Oh, hold on. This is from Srila Prabhupada. This is a Prabhupada calendar quote. He says on January 30, I don't know if you have it, he says, if you want perfection in your business, then you must try to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, you're simply wasting your time. So to understand that even if you're doing a business, you're doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. So how do you understand our propensity? Most of us can understand our propensity is to serve others. Kalo Shudra Sambhavaha. So we dedicate ourselves to ensuring that we are able to chant nicely, we are able to sleep, and we are able to get up and we're able to do everything. We ensure that there's money and there's enough money so that we don't have to worry about it. And then we engage in the process of sadhana. Beyond this, if we recognize that we have certain propensities, say for business, for other things, then we pursue it, but strategize about how that particular activity can involve Krishna. How do I contribute to Mahaprabhu through that activity? Okay, there used to be guards for Srila Prabhupada who used to be Kshatriyas. Okay. There are Kshatriyas in the movement. There are many, many personalities who had Kshatriya propensity. They take up, administration. There are propensities for business. Then you engage in business, but keeping in mind that the core objective is to be able to chant nicely. That's the point I was trying to make, that you have to be, someone has to plan to be a Raja Rishi. A Raja Rishi means someone who is engaging in the activity of being a Kshatriya, but he's also a Rishi. He's internal more than being external. So dovetailing our activities to Krishna. If you cannot clearly identify any activity, dovetail the day's activity to Krishna. Focus on being able to chant. Focus on being able to chant. Focus on being able to chant. I'm actually repeating it. I repeated it thrice because focus on being able to chant nicely and then plan life around it. The Varnashrama will fit in on its own. If there are propensities, engage them in the service of the Lord. We don't really need so much to understand the specific Varna, but there are ways and means to do so. And that would be easier in one sense. It's much easier. It's much easier to act as a Brahmana when you are a Brahmana. It's much easier to act as a Kshatriya when you are a Kshatriya. This was the point of what we're trying to raise last time. How do we identify it? There are ways to do so. But until then, we at least identify the goal. The goal is to serve. The goal is to chant. We just have to remember that, and we facilitate around it. I'll elaborate more on a separate occasion. I think I've answered the two questions, and I believe that there are no more. It's already 10 o'clock, so I don't want to take up any more of your very valuable time, and we want to also come back and be able to do this again on Thursday. So thank you very much. If there are more thoughts, and if there's anything which you want to share, feel free to write to me. It's prayojana108@gmail.com, and you can even comment on the class because I'm going to upload it. So this would allow me to answer and everybody else can also understand. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.